Hey, everybody, it's Stu Smith and Pat Bonus here with a tactical fitness report. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit about goals. I mean, we all have certain goals, but then there are things that we do outside of those goals that can be risky to us. So what we're going to do now is kind of discuss about some of the things we've seen in the past and recommendations we make to those who are doing other things that could be potentially injurious to us. And let's take it, let's do it for instance, right? You're training for a spec ops job, right? You are a special ops candidate. And both Pat and I train these type of folks, and we see them typically as A-type high achievers. I mean, pushing really hard all the time. And what tends to happen is there's other activities they like to do, right? Besides, their 2 or 3 hour workout that includes running, swimming, rucking, lifting, calisthenics. I mean, that alone is pretty challenging on the body. But when you start coupling it with other events like martial arts, really hard work. I mean, depending on what type of job you have, things like that, that can also, potentially dangerous work, can cause certain injuries that typically occur in 3 ways. An injury that you will have a week of, or if you're lucky, maybe a few weeks where you have to, work around that injury. You have an injury that requires some rehab that may take months. Or worse, you take an injury that requires surgery in order to fix. And now your goal that was probably 2 to 3 months out for you achieving, a certain status in your training has now just been bumped several months to the right. So, Patrick, both Patrick and I were talking about, martial arts, for instance, with kids that are doing both, training with us and doing martial arts on the backside. What is it that you've seen, Pat, in your history of training these guys?
Yeah, well, the thing, it came up. I saw a guy just back from graduating SEALs, and he was a wrestler all through high school and college. And he talked about third phase hand-to-hand combat. It was a pretty telling story about how one guy couldn't really handle it. And I've heard other spec ops, SWAT, you name it, talk about how you have to get used to being in physical confrontations. You have to learn about your fight and flight, and not to sound like all macho and, taking a punch type stuff. If you have an older brother, you're probably taking a punch or two. Right. So,
yeah.
And then I give a recommendation for the guys who maybe haven't been in physical sports. I played hockey and very physical. You played football, very physical, and rugby and other things. And they get this idea that, I want to do jujitsu. I want to do something like this. And I always worry about that unknown variable of the guy or girl comes in and sends your, arm bar into a little bit over hyperextension.
Yeah. Seen that many times.
And so I had told a new trainee, a guy who came in and he wants to know kind of everything. He's really like a sponge, wants to absorb as much. Sure. And I gave advice and I said, he was like, I'm doing jujitsu and that. And I said, well, as you get closer, like I really, to be quite honest, I would, if you've learned how to take your knocks and stuff like that, I would stop doing it. That was my recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and also let's set up the timeline too. Like if this guy has 2 or 3 years out, I don't have a problem with someone practicing, some kind of martial arts. But when you're talking 3, 4, 6 months out, now you really need to adjust some of your training just so you can mitigate those risks to injury.
Yeah. And I look at it as, obviously we do a lot of stuff in the water and I coach swim and all that. And I look at it almost as a tapering concept.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you go and you hopefully get through that, like mitigating, like get through the training, get what you need to get, the techniques and things like that. And then, like you said, you step away. And, unfortunately what happened is he came in yesterday and I had this sandbag, swim, grinder all planned out. And I said, with the leg, he got put in a leg lock and the person put it a little too far. And, I said, do a lunge with that leg, just a lunge, no weight, nothing. He couldn't even do it. I mean, and I'm like, all right, so if you can swim, just work on your technique. And that's all you're going to do today. And that's the thing too, not knowing the severity, if it's muscular or anything. I'm not a
Oh, sure. Of
doctor,
course.
not a physical therapist, but it puts him, not just at the 6 months or whatever, you talk about surgery, you talk about the week. But if you get into an injury where it's more than a week, you're now setting yourself back in training. Because as you know, I mean, a day here or a day there off can be very beneficial, but 2 weeks off can almost start you back at zero.
Yeah. They say it almost takes, and I'm not sure who they are, but, anywhere from, if you take 2 weeks off, it's going to take you 4 weeks to catch back up.
Yeah.
About a 2-to-1 ratio of, playing catch up.
Yeah, and I've noticed that, in my training, that anything, over a week, or, with the injuries that I've had, the surgeries that I've had, anything over a week, you're really starting back at baby steps, and that's got to be clear. And, I was standing on the edge of a cliff over a river with a kid, and the kid wanted to jump in, and I've done it, and I go first, and he's like walking on the edge of this cliff, and you can see the nervousness in his body, and he's a very good athlete, very aware. And I looked at him, I said, do not hesitate. Hesitation leads to anxiety, and that will kill you. You will fall, you will hold on too tight, you'll cramp up, you'll slip, you'll do whatever. And he's like, that's not what I really want to be hearing right now. and I said, but the reality is to have a little bit more confidence, and I guess there's an expression that a lot of SEALs use, that hesitation kills. And I thought when I was talking to this kid on the edge of the cliff that I was original, and I said that to you earlier, and I wasn't at all. But there's that level of balance too in mitigating risk. You have to experience these things, and I think, like you said, it is very valuable for these guys going into the teams or into MARSOC or anything, to understand how to get into a confrontation, how to keep themselves safe, knowing when to separate, knowing how to use tools. I really like Krav Maga for that example, because it does use weapons, it does learn how to defend against weapons, it does understand when you're in a certain situation that you can be the biggest, strongest, toughest guy. You don't even want to get close enough to be in an armbar.
Oh, yeah, and plus, I mean, it's also incorporates situational awareness too.
100%. And the first thing is if you can get away and you can separate, then that's key. It's not always cowardice, but how do you do these things? How do you? I mean, imagine if you start training for SEALs, or you get a contract and you're part of a rugby club in Boston. And that's a big social network, and it's a lot of fun. And how do you walk away from your team? And that's where that goal comes into mind. What is the line you want to get to, and what are the things on the periphery that are potentially going to create a dislocated shoulder?
Yeah.
That could, one, keep you out of your goal, or two, get you to the point where you're going to have to go through the waiver process.
Yeah. A funny story. You mentioned rugby. I mean, I played rugby for 3 years at Navy. I didn't play my first semester, and I didn't play my last semester. Okay. So I played football my first semester, and then that didn't work out very well, and I started playing rugby. Right. And then you find out when you are a senior where you are going after you graduate. So probably January, my senior year, I found out I was going to Buds. There's a spring rugby season, obviously, in college, and I didn't play. And that was part of the same reasoning that we're talking about. But I had several sprained ankles throughout the journey. staples in my head, shoulders in pain, all these little aches and pains that luckily weren't devastating. But not only could I have aggravated those, but I could have gotten a completely new injury as well. And I know I'm what ifing this. In fact, it was hard to say, sorry guys, I'm not going to play this year. Now, one good thing about being at Navy is you're easily replaced. If you
Yeah.
if you're not playing, you're easily replaced. So I wasn't an irreplaceable teammate. But we did have 4 guys on our rugby team that all went to Buds that year, and I think I was the only guy that didn't play.
Okay.
The other 3 guys played, and they also made it through Buds. So, what's the answer there? Were they lucky? I will say there was one that I was really surprised played, and because he had this constant dislocating shoulder that he never got checked because he knew that medical at the time would have probably disqualified him. And so, I mean, even like making his bed, he could pop out his shoulder.
Yep.
I mean, reaching out too far and it just, making a bed could pop out his shoulder. And I remember one day he popped out his shoulder making his bed, and it was a 3-4 hour log PT session right after that. And he just sucked it up and did it, which is just incredible, on his mental toughness ability. And I'm not saying I have the right answer, right? Because there are people who have continued doing their martial arts and crazy jobs and contact sports, up until the day they leave for the Navy, right? And make it through. However, what we're talking about is pure statistics. And statistically speaking, you will be injured in something, and it could be injured in your own workouts for that matter. I mean, I'm not saying, you need to take it easy on your running or rucking because, you're going to be, joining the Navy in a few months. That's, you might want to taper, but at the same time, it really comes down to how can you prevent yourself from getting injured? Because here is what I have seen. I have seen guys do, MMA workouts, fighting, rolling around, punching, kicking. I've seen guys, get horrible contusions on their shin, prevented them from running. I've seen guys get broken hands from punching. That took multiple months of rehab because the hand and the foot heal really slow. So if those 2 areas get injured, you got months, you're sidetracked. And that just so happened this one required surgery, right? And then it requires so much surgery that it disqualifies you from the Navy. I've seen that too. That's the kind of gamble you take when you do some of these things and you're months out. I mean, it's great. It's great to be in a combative sport. I loved it, and I still do. And, I just think that, there's a time and place, to add those combatives and challenging sports into your life to build that mental toughness. If you have multiple years prior to your goal of serving, fine, do it. And be smart, try not to get injured, and if you can be on the lucky side of those statistics, you're good to go. But if you're on the opposite side, it's going to throw a curveball at your status and what you're able to do.
Yeah, and I think that's, the not having the answer too. It's not, like I said, I didn't want that kid to, by no means did I want, and it wasn't like I didn't want him to get hurt, and it wasn't like I told you so.
Oh no,
it wasn't like, because that's the worst thing when something happens. Like, oh, I told you so. Like, my mom said that to me. I came home with 36 stitches one time. She's like, I told you so. I was like, no, but I'm okay. But that's the thing is that there are individuals, like you said, that just have this constitution where they can just bulldog through anything. They have shorter, wider muscles. They have better connective tissues. Whatever it may be, they can take their lumps and get through. And then there's those other individuals that I think get injured. And it would be interesting to look at the statistic too, because I think that training partners can be really good, really beneficial. They can be the thing that pushes you and helps you make gains better than anything else, and in combative training, it's the same thing, that if you have a good partner that you trust,
Yes,
that,
absolutely.
that, I've trained with individuals that are borderline reckless, and you have to very kind of politely just, and gravitate towards the other guy. And like I said to you before, there's a guy that I trained with who had, an iffy shoulder like me. And we had a very, we just would just, all right, that's far enough, man.
Yep.
And we would go hard. We would compete and do, really cool stuff where, you're protecting against a weapon. So you're focusing on the most deadly thing. So he comes at you with a knife and you just grab that hand, and he can be wailing you with the other hand and doing everything like that. And you're just making sure that you're securing the knife and everything. I mean, and we would battle, but we're very good at communicating. We weren't going easy on each other. And I think that if you're in jujitsu, that's like you said, I think it's awesome. I think it's great to tussle and have that experience, and, give each other the high five after, and learn, to walk away from those situations. But I think the best advice that I could probably give, that if you're going to continue with jujitsu as you're going for your contract and things like that, is make sure you have a very good partner,
Yes.
someone you communicate very well with, that the lines and the rules of engagement are very clear.
Another thing too with mitigating injury is, as your skill level improves, your mitigation to injury also improves, right? You are able to, mitigate, those risks to injury, I should say. But if you are saying, hey, I think I'm going to start doing jujitsu today, and I'm 6 months out from leaving, probably not the best time to start.
Yeah, and I would say that there are ways to get bounced around a little bit. If you're 6 months out and you just don't have that experience, like those blocking pads that you hit, I'll knock a kid around a little bit and have them cover, just get that kind of feeling of, and doing it when they're tired. So they'll do like some runs and flips and some bear crawls up the stairs. And then I'll come out around the corner and I'll hit them just, and they'll cover.
Right.
And it just gets them used to that. What they're probably looking for a little bit in jujitsu is that understanding, how to, when you're exhausted, to work through it and not put yourself in a dangerous situation. When you get tired in jujitsu and you leave an arm dangling out there, well, that could be the end for you.
Right.
And I do think that's important. But at the end of the day too, like I said, if you're in SEALs and you're in a hand-to-hand combat situation, you've probably made a mistake in situational awareness
Throughout that process. Yeah. That's a good point.
And I think that there's good ways to test yourself, and get ready. Like one of my trainees had a fear of heights, so we took him skydiving. Went to the extreme. It's like, you're going to have to do that in SEALs, and it's very controlled. It's tandem jump the first time, but you're still standing on the edge of a plane, this rickety old little plane, and it's putting up in the air, and it's a nervous feeling. And he did it, and after it, he wanted to go up again. And I think there are things that you have to test yourself with to make sure you have the mettle of, to get through. And again, that's not the perfect recipe. As you've said, there is no recipe, but there are safe ways to test yourself, to test your nerves, to test your mental toughness, to stay engaging in those things. But, you have to be very mindful of your body.
Oh yeah.
And with the programs that guys design, that, they're going to get, I got to run, I got to put the miles in, and then you get IT band issues, which can keep you from running. I mean, they flame up, and that's right there. Well, what happens with IT bands, often comes from people who are slightly bow-legged or running on a road that has a camber, a crown.
Yep.
So go to the track, and that right there, like you said, is as you start to get tweaks and injuries, you start to get better at mitigating. So run on the track.
Yeah.
And start rucking more, shuffle. And it's just like you said about jujitsu, you're not just going to start if you've never done it before. The same thing is, I hear guys, oh, I got to go run in sand. I would ease my way into sand.
Oh yeah, everything should have a logical progression. Um, and same with, like I said, your last 3 to 6 months before you are departing, there are some things that you should consider. Yeah, I would probably pull back from some of the combatives, but I'm not here to beat up on combatives. I'm here to beat up on risk to injury. Another thing I would avoid is any 1-rep maxes, any max, plus negatives, any weighted, max rep exercises like weighted pull-ups. I've seen guys go too heavy with that and blow a bicep, need surgery on their bicep. You know, um, 1-rep mileage, like you just mentioned on running. You should start tapering at some point and start coming down. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't run fast and hard. You just don't need to run super far, and build up some of those overuse injuries that can occur. Or if you've had a nice logical progression over a long period of time, you can just kind of hold it, and just maintain that plateau a little bit on your progression, during the last few months, and just master, certain distances, master your 1.5 mile fast run, master your 4 mile timed run, master a 5-6 mile ruck, a 2 mile ocean swim, master that, because that's what you're going to be tested at. That's how you get through this training. You've already mastered getting to the training. Now you got to start focusing on getting to the training. And if you're doing things that don't look like your future training, you have to ask yourself, is this something I need to be doing?
Yeah, and and again, this was not at all to, like you said, I think it was a gateway into other conversations.
Sure.
So that the jujitsu is a gateway into the kid who just goes to a beach and tries to run and pulls a calf muscle, or breaks a metatarsal, or kid who's playing in a men's league hockey who breaks his wrist, and then it's the scaphoid muscle that needs a pin because it has no blood supply, like you said, hands
Yep.
heal slow or need surgery. So it's understanding your body. It's not living in fear while
Yes.
you're preparing. It's not hesitating, but it's asking those questions. If you have these kids who are doing, like, if they're not you know breaking up their training, if they're not doing cals, if they're not doing lifting, if they're not periodization, if there's not that, then they are running the risk of getting injury. And if they
Sure.
continue something too long, as we've talked about, and you have periodization planned into all your programs, but you know I usually run like a 5-week program, and then I switch it. It's all the same muscle groups and things like that, and then there's another 5 weeks, just varied exercises and movements.
Sure.
And if I were getting ready for a road race, I might do a mile run before a 5 mile race. So on a Friday, I might do a mile run, just tune things up. And it's not that I'm not running, but I'm making sure that I'm not running really, really hard up to the race. I want to make sure that I'm charged up and ready to go for that run. My
Yep.
calves, everything feels right. And so I think that is, um, you know, the area where, if you aren't sure, there is so much available right now between you and so many of these other guys. Ask the question.
Sure.
Yeah. And you're gonna get all these different answers, like, oh, do jujitsu because I saw this guy who started crying in hand-to-hand combat, or get a pistol permit because I was afraid of the bang from the gun, or start doing
Scuba
50.
dive.
Yep,
Yep. Scuba
start doing
dive. Yeah.
50-yard underwaters because so many guys fail that. So you hear so many different things where guys fail. I think that's also a lesson that there's not one thing you should be focusing on.
Yeah.
And so that is hard to filter through the minutia as well. Is that, well, all right, well, why should I quit jujitsu if I like it? And we'll go back to what I said as well. It's not, it's not that you should quit, but make sure you have a great partner and
Yeah.
understand what you're doing. And you say it's a idea, it's not the idea, and that's very valuable. And then also for me, it's advice. You can take it or leave it. It's
Oh,
not,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
it's not
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's not
Like I
my
said,
voice.
our goal here was just to say, hey, look, there are things that we have seen throughout training people that have just completely upended and turned upside down training programs and timing and scheduling of people's goals, right? And, whether that is, getting dropped from the delayed entry program because you now have to have surgery, right? Then you have to go through all that again. It just depends, how long is this injury going to sidetrack you from, your progress and where you're going. So my big thing is it worth it? And especially if you don't have, put it this way, I would do it this way. If you don't have time to heal from majority of the types of injuries that occur in these extracurricular activities, don't do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? If you have 2 years before you're leaving, typically, unless you really hurt yourself, you're going to have plenty of time to recover and build up and do all that. But, if you have less than a year, less than 6 months, less than 3 months, definitely not,
Yeah.
because you can see the timeline getting shorter and shorter, and your risk to injury can sometimes get higher and higher. Right.
Yeah.
So that's when you probably have to be your smartest. And I would say the last 6 to 9 months before you depart.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it would be interesting is to, in the last 6 months, what are the optimal things to really tune up? What are those things to really fine tune, and break it down into, especially with the new PSTs with, programs that, very, very little risk to injury, and in maintaining everything and kind of working on your strengths of, okay, I'm pretty good at this. I have to incorporate this, but where potentially, could I fall short? And then not trying to really learn anything new that is risky or dangerous, in terms of injury prevention. So like a new movement, trying to learn a snatch 6 months out is dangerous too. You can blow a shoulder out. It's just not,
absolutely.
it's not a great thing to learn 6 months out. But if you've been doing that for years,
skill level,
you don't, it's the same thing with power cleans. If you're trying to learn that 6 months before you ship, I would probably rethink that, just because it's a very coordinated movement and you can hurt yourself. But again, if you've been doing power movements, Olympic lifts for a period of time, then you don't throw that out.
Sure.
So it goes to that whole level of understanding your body, knowing when, you're worn out and you're thinking like you just got to keep grinding because that's the mentality of, of buds, or is today a really good day for a cold soak, a hot soak, some Ryobi car buffer, some of those things where you are okay with taking a break and recovering and eliminating some of those risky behaviors.
Yep. Every day is a good day for the car buffer. If you ask me. I use it all the time. I carry one in my car, and I carry one. I keep one in my living room, so I am constantly around a car buffer, and they're heavenly. So, thank Jeff Nichols for that one. He recommended that one, and some of his buddies have been using them for years in professional sports. So, highly recommend them. So, anyway, how do you close this one, Patrick?
I think that you have to start to understand your body. You have to, just like anything in life, you have to be able to read a room. You have to be able to walk in and know when the situation is not good, you don't get a good vibe, and feel that as well in your training. If you feel like you're pushing into a place where you're running the risk, you're getting tweaks and pains, reset. Because the worst thing is that once you're injured, is sitting in a bar saying, well, I could have been there. I could have done this, but I blew my shoulder out benching. And the worst thing is I shoulda, coulda, woulda. And do your best to really understand your body. And even when you do, things happen. And please understand that with what I'm saying about combatives is um, is not like, I'm not trying to say that they're just, going to create injury. Not at all. I think they're massively valuable. I encourage individuals to take them and to learn. But like you said, there has to then maybe be an idea of when to stop.
You know
When
what?
when
I agree. I agree. That's perfect. My addition to this closing would be it depends, right? It depends on your skill level. It depends on your timeline. It depends on what you're going for, because your training now should help you get through the selection or boot camp or academy that you're trying to get through tomorrow, right? And for instance, I have had many people who I've recommended do martial arts, during their prep training, because their training in police work and SWAT teams required passing some martial arts, or should say, apprehension of bad guys and cuffing them and all that, which if you've never done wrestling or you've never done any type of grappling combative, you probably need to practice. So there are many different reasons why you should do those, and why you shouldn't. So once again, it depends. Your martial arts in spec ops programming is not that challenging. If you've done any type of, wrestling in high school, if you've done, some kind of boxing, played around, if you've been in a couple of fights in your life, you know, it's going to be, um, the learning curve is not that steep. In other words, it's a nice steady progression of learning how to do some of those. And eventually it you can go off and specialize in certain combatives, depending on what program you're in and what tactical profession you're in, whereas, a lot of guys don't advance to those certain levels, right? It's just, it's up to you on how you want to drive your interests in your profession, because there's
yeah,
all types of skills and you can't master them all.
yeah, and just to throw a pitch out for Krav Maga. Um, Krav Maga, I've learned from an Israeli special forces guy, and the one thing that I like is that they will throw in jujitsu. Like if you go to the ground, you're gonna tussle, and there's gonna be chokes, and there's gonna be this, and there's gonna be that. They're gonna teach you how to draw a weapon right. They're gonna teach you how to defend against the weapon. And I see a lot of things that are in the police that look very similar to Krav. But
Oh, absolutely.
the beautiful thing about Krav is that it's open. If there's something good from Aikido, they're going to use it. They're going
Yeah.
to use that, your forward momentum. They're going to use it against you. So, I do suggest if you can find a good Krav instructor, and like you said, you were a combat swimmer, so it's really good to learn from you. If you meet an Israeli who's been over there, they train like with 100% aggression. They, they go at situations full blast. And if you can find a good Israeli operator who is well skilled in Krav, they will also be very good at setting boundaries, and not, getting you into those situations. So again, that does depend on, the person who's instructing, I think, with everything, and your partner. But I think Krav Maga is going to teach you combative. It's going to teach you skills. It's going to teach you how to clear a room. It's going to teach you situational awareness. I think it's really great. I think it's a
Oh,
really
absolutely. But the thing to also remember is this required in my pre-training before I get to my school, right? Is this something that's required? Like I said, for a police guy, for a SWAT team guy, absolutely. For a guy who's going to have to endure something like Ranger School, buds, you know, special forces selection, PJ selection. No, you need to be running, rucking, swimming, PT, and lifting, and getting your body in tune for that type of pounding, not necessarily the skills that come after you've made it through the selection. So, be smart. Don't waste your time right now on things that aren't going to help you get through your goal. And That's kind of my philosophy on training and extracurricular activities.
I think that's the best. I think that's the best way to end it. Don't waste your time on things you don't need. You don't need that aren't going to serve you.
Yeah, that you don't need now.
Right.
I think you will need all of these combative skills that we discussed, and whether you have them now or you need to build them later, you're never going to have the opportunity to build them later if you don't get through the challenging selection program that you're competing for right now. So
Yeah.
That's where it comes down to. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, Patrick, thanks for for another tactical fitness report. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm sure there might be a lot of what ifs, after this one. So post them down below on the YouTube channel, or if you're listening on iTunes or Google Play, just send us an email. We'll get back to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later.
See ya.